The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. Luke, the first chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. At that time, Mary got ready and hurried to a town in the hill country of Judea, where she entered Zechariah's home and greeted Elizabeth. When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the baby leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with Holy Spirit. In a loud voice, she exclaimed, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the child you will bear. But why am I so favored that the mother of my Lord should come to me? As soon as the sound of your greeting reached my ears, the baby in my womb leaped for joy. Blessed is she who has believed that the Lord would fulfill his promises to her." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Christ. I invite you to be seated. So I wanted to pick up on something that Ken started to explore in his sermon last weekend, is this idea of expectation. Part of this Advent journey that we're on, this expectation that is created in us for this birth event that we will celebrate this Monday and Tuesday, Christmas Eve and Christmas. This birth event of the Christ into the world, into creation, all over again. And in our gospel this week, we have this wonderful story of these two women pregnant with expectation. Pregnant, yes, physically pregnant, but filled with an expectation for something new, something mysterious. Two women who have said yes to God in a time that brings them actually great turmoil and suffering. So let's look a little bit at this story and see if I can explain to you what I mean by that. So let's start with Mary, the mother of Yeshua, Jesus. Yeshua being the Hebrew name for her son. God saves is the name she is told to name her son. But look at Mary's situation. She's engaged to this older man, Joseph. They're not yet married. They're not yet living together. And then she's found with child. And immediately, the women in the village gathering at the well in the morning to gather their water and bring it home. That was kind of like the ancient newspaper. That was when the women gathered in the morning. That's when they would share all the gossip and the stories. And we can imagine that around the well, when that news got out about Mary, the judgment started. The labels, the wondering, how is Mary pregnant? What has she been doing? Did she cheat on Joseph? Oh, that will bring shame to their families. Poor Joseph, poor Mary's dad. The shame of it all. And they would think that she would most likely be killed. This could cost Mary her life. But the labels and the judgment and the shame that surrounded her was heavy. And Luke tells us that Mary left Nazareth to travel south 5 days by foot to go visit her kinswoman, Elizabeth. We're not told how she traveled. We're not told who she travels with. This would be a very difficult thing for her to do. In that culture, women did not travel by themselves. So somebody accompanied her down to Judea, down to the little village of Ankarim, down just outside of Jerusalem, where Zechariah and Elizabeth lived. And Zechariah, the priest, who had offered sacrifice in the temple, when he heard about his wife becoming pregnant, and he doubted God, Because why? Elizabeth was postmenopausal. She wasn't supposed to be able to have any more children. And he's given the news that, oh, your wife is pregnant. And this should have been cause for great rejoicing. Her curse of barrenness was suddenly and finally going to be removed from them. But instead, what does Elizabeth face back in the village of Incarum? The women gathering at the well, the rumors start. How did Elizabeth become pregnant? And what? Zechariah isn't being able to explain it to us. He's suddenly mute. He can't tell us what happened. All we know is that he doubted. And whatever story he's going to tell is going to be filled with doubt anyway, so God shuts him up. And the people in the village are left wondering. And Elizabeth, being old enough, has been through this a few times. She says, I am not going to endure the labeling and the judgment and the questioning. She removes herself from the village and goes up into the hill country to wait out her time of pregnancy. She separates herself so she doesn't have to listen to the voices of disparagement and judgment. And so here in this meeting, a young woman labeled because of God's mysterious action in her life, and an elderly woman labeled for God's mysterious divine action in her life. Both heavy with the burdens of people's judgment come together. And in their greeting up in that hillside that day, we're told that the baby within Elizabeth's womb leapt, flipped, kicked her a good one. John quickened in her womb, and she felt it, and she proclaims to Mary, you certainly are the bearer of good news. You are filled, you are radiant with the presence of God. Certainly the divine hand has touched you. The baby within my womb tells me so. I feel the life within me that has been promised me. And these two women bring each other the comfort of good news in seeing that indeed new life will emerge from them. It is mysterious. They don't know what the future holds exactly, but in each other they take comfort in knowing that God is with them, and in fact, the promises made to them for new life are real, and that God is faithful. And Mary responds to Elizabeth's proclamation, blessed are you among women, blessed is the fruit of your womb, blessed is the child you will bear. Certainly the hand of God is upon him, and he will bring greatness to this country again. And Mary's response is the Magnificat. Thank you for beautifully sharing that with us today. She proclaims what Hannah proclaimed generations earlier. Truly, our God is with us. Our God has blessed us. The future is not of abandonment or sorrow or judgment or separation. No, our God comes to the lowly. Our God comes to the needy, to the hurting, to the broken, to the marginalized. Our God lifts us up from the valleys of our lives and brings to us good things and good news and what we need to be together in life. This is the promise of our God. Our God is a God of reversals. Our God is a God of surprises. And in that sharing, in that proclamation, is the good news. The good news that is filled with anticipation for God emerging in their midst. I know our God is a God of reversal, a God of healing. I know the power of the good news proclaimed among people who have been labeled and shunned and set aside and marginalized. I know the good news and the liberation that comes to people when they hear the promises of God for new life and forgiveness and unity. In 2009, I had the privilege of traveling to Ein Kerem, to southern Israel, with a group of pilgrims from here in Iowa. And one of the women in our group had been carrying a tremendous burden for 40 years. Her infant child died from a malady that was unexplainable. She had always felt responsible for that. Nobody could take away or assuage her guilt. She always felt like she had done something wrong. And we were in Ein Kerem that day, and we proclaimed this gospel, and I simply invited the group, tell me about the good news God is bringing to you today. Imagine yourself greeted by Mary today. Mary filled with divine love, with divine life, with divine goodness, bringing to you a message of good news. What would that be? And this woman shared with our group of 30 people this heavy burden. And in sharing the story, for the first time that day, she was able to weep openly and to receive the love of God that lifted her burden of guilt, like she had done something wrong. She, for the first time, heard that God has been with her all through this, that God has not been mad at her. God had never blamed her for anything, but in fact, her God loved her in the midst of it. And she was able to receive that in that courtyard outside the church that honors the birth of St. John the Baptist. It still happens, my friends. The greeting between people can be filled with life and promise and hope. That's what you and I have to offer in this Christmas time. You know, as I was reflecting on this season, as I've been listening to people, there are many in our midst who have expectations for Christmas, who dream and fantasize about the fulfillment of that one deep longing that we all share, and that is to be with those we love, to gather with family, to have joy and laughter, to have the impressions and the heaviness and the brokenness of the world removed from us by the love and laughter of those we call family. That's what we long for. And there are people in our midst who fantasize to have that happen again this year. And that fantasy will not be fulfilled for them. That expectation will not happen for them because of divorce or death or distance. There will be those in our midst this Christmas whose longing is intense and unsatisfied. And I wonder if you and I can bring to them a message of good news in the midst of their pregnant expectation. That we can bring to them a message of good news, reminding them that they're not alone, that Christ is with them, that the church exists exactly for this reason, to give people a place to come together with others who are pregnant with expectation and longing. And it is fulfilled only when we allow ourselves to rely fully on the Christ who wants to be born into our lives this year. Perhaps the one great gift that you and I have to offer somebody this year is just a little extra hospitality. To keep this season from being so focused on me and mine and ours, And let it be about everyone. Everyone who's longing, everyone who is pregnant with expectation. Let us notice those people around us this Christmas, to take that extra second, to truly listen when we ask, how are you? To listen for that unfulfilled longing, that pregnancy of expectation that remains as we gather.